This program is supported by SMC Global Power, RJK Services Manpower Agency Corporation, Stark Molecular Laboratory, North Luzon Express Terminal.
Rescuers were searching for survivors in the rubble of a 3-floor mini market in Indonesia that suddenly crumpled while it was brimming with people.
5 people were found dead and 9 others were injured. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I am CJ Hirro.
And I'm Nina Ricci, Alagao, Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. And now for the headlines. More than 70 prisoners of war handed back to Ukraine by Russia. Indonesia rescuers search rubble after mini market collapse kills 5 people. Major companies forged to resume operations amid increasing COVID-19 cases. India taps new energy cash cow. And the branding genius of the K-pop band BTS that fans say was all worth it. Western allies pledged more military supplies and sanctions to assist Ukraine as its troops battle against Russian forces. Ukraine's armed forces said the fighting has intensified throughout Donbas, and the Ministry of Defense reported heavy clashes near the town of Marinka in the Donetsk region. In a virtual meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and European leaders, the U.S. and EU agreed to increase Moscow's international isolation. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki said they will continue to provide Ukraine with more ammunition as well as more military assistance in response to fears that Ukraine was running low. The Pentagon, meanwhile, said that Ukraine has also recently received fighter planes and aircraft parts to bolster its air force, declining to specify the number of aircraft and their origin. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby told reporters that Ukrainian forces have more fixed-wing fighter aircraft now than they did 2 weeks ago.
Cette nuit, nous recevons ce deuxième lot d'équipements militaires en provenance de la Russie au nom du ministre de la Défense et des anciens combattants. Donc c'est la manifestation d'un partenariat très fructueux depuis que nous avons commencé à reprendre à travailler avec l'État russe.
Russia handed over 60 soldiers and 16 civilians to Ukraine in an exchange of prisoners of war. Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk said the swap was the 5th exchange of prisoners of war. She said the swap included 10 Ukrainian officers. Civilians and members of the military have been taken captive on both sides since Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24.
After nearly 2 months under siege, the southern city of Mariupol could fall into Russian hands within hours, a Ukrainian official said, as the two sides agreed to a humanitarian corridor to allow civilians to flee the devastated port city. Control of Mariupol and Donbas region in the east would allow Moscow to create a southern corridor to the Crimean Peninsula that it annexed in 2014. Moscow made another call for the city's defenders to surrender and announced the opening of a humanitarian corridor for any Ukrainian troops who agreed to lay down their arms. Offering some respite, Kyiv said it had agreed with Russian forces to open a safe route for civilians to flee the devastated city.
As Russia recently launched dozens of airstrikes across eastern Ukraine, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres appealed for a four-day truce. Gutierrez said a truce would allow safe passage for civilians to flee the eastern war zone.
The humanitarian pause would provide the necessary conditions to meet two crucial imperatives. First, safe passage of all civilians willing to leave the areas of current and expected confrontation in coordination with the International Committee of the Red Cross.
The UN chief said the truce will also make way for additional humanitarian aid to reach severely affected regions.
Second, beyond humanitarian operations already taking place, a pause will allow for the safe delivery of life-saving humanitarian aid to people in the hardest hit areas such as Mariupol, Kherson, Donetsk, and Luhansk. The United Nations is ready to send humanitarian aid convoys during this period to these locations, and we are submitting detailed plans to the parties.
Troops in the 64th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade were awarded an honorary title by Russian President Vladimir Putin. In a signed letter, Putin congratulated the unit for their great heroism and courage and awarded the troops the title of Guards for protecting Russia's sovereignty. The president's congratulatory statement also read, "Through astute and bold actions during the special military operation in Ukraine, the unit staff became a role model in fulfilling its military duty, valor, dedication, and professionalism." Putin's move is a public message to Ukraine's government and the West after many leaders condemned the alleged massacres by Russian troops in the Ukrainian towns of Borodyanka and Bucha. The Kremlin leader strongly denied any involvement in the mass killings and reiterated that the images of civilian bodies on the streets of Bucha were staged.
The Russian Defense Ministry released a short video showing Admiral Nikolaiyev and two other officers in front of some 100 sailors on a parade ground. Moscow said all of the 500 crew members were rescued after the April 13 blast. The Defense Ministry said the fleet members would continue their service in the Navy. Earlier, Russia acknowledged that the Moskva had sunk, attributing the disaster to an ammunition explosion. But Ukraine claimed it hit the vessel with at least one Neptune missile, saying that some of those on board the ship had died. Up to now, neither country has provided evidence to support the claims.
Police kept up a curfew in central Sri Lanka a day after the killing of an anti-government demonstrator, which triggered international condemnation. The government promised investigations into allegations that police used excessive force to disperse people protesting high fuel prices and demanding the president's resignation over the worsening economic crisis. Sri Lanka is in the grip of its worst economic downturn since independence in 1948, with regular blackouts, severe shortages of fuel and other goods, and record inflation causing widespread misery. A crowd was about to set alight a diesel tanker when officers opened fire, the first fatal clash since anti-government protests broke out this month. Officials said at least 29 people, including 11 policemen, were wounded. Sri Lankan authorities said they had initiated an inquiry into the conduct of officers at Rambukana and ordered an indefinite curfew in the area. Top Colombo-based envoys, including those from the U.S., Britain, and Canada, expressed concern over the police shooting and called for restraint from all sides as Sri Lanka opens bailout talks with the International Monetary Fund in Washington.
Rescue workers were searching for survivors after a deadly mini-market collapse in Indonesia. The three-floor building in Borneo Island's Banjar district suddenly crumpled while it was filled with customers and employees. According to South Kalimantan police spokesman Mohammed Rifai, emergency services were dispatched to the scene to dig overnight, pulling 5 bodies from the rubble and freeing 9 people. Rifai said the mini-market building, as well as many buildings in Banjar, stand on peatland, so flooding is usual. But the exact cause of the collapse hasn't been identified. Indonesia's lax construction standards have long raised concerns about building safety. In 2020, at least 2 people were injured as a 5-story building in Jakarta partly collapsed. And previously, in 2018, at least 75 people were injured when a mezzanine floor at Indonesia's stock exchange building collapsed into the lobby. Coming up, last disqualification case against Philippine presidential candidate Marcos junked. High-speed boats seized as Spanish police mash drug trafficking gang. And Mali receives more military helicopters and weapons from Russia. Stay tuned. Mata ng Agila International will return.
This portion is brought to you by 318 Automart, Arlex Trading and Construction Supplies.
Love is all about time. Di minamadali ang pag-prepare. Di minamadali ang pagsasama-sama. Di minamadali ang pagpapasarap. Like the love in every Pure Foods ready-to-eat. Slow cooked and ready in 8 minutes. Sarap na di minadali, ngayon pinadaling lutuin para may time ka sa mga mahal mo. Because love takes time. Pure Foods ready-to-eat.
Bank of Commerce. What we are is personal banking, where we understand that every deposit is your hard-earned money. Every loan is for good reason. Every service aids in your convenience. Every business of ours is meant to grow yours. We hear you, feel you, and we act on your every banking need. Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba, sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
After a long wait, the Commission on Elections, or Comelec, finally dismissed the last disqualification case against presidential candidate Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Filed by Pudno nga Ilocano, the petition cited Marcos' conviction on tax-related cases in 1995 when he was still Ilocos Norte's vice governor. But the Comelec First Division denied it for lack of merit. Citing a Supreme Court ruling, the division noted the tax cases of Marcos is not a crime involving moral turpitude. According to the division, it can be said that the filing of income tax returns is only for record purposes, not for the payment of tax liability. Marcos may have been neglectful in performing such an obligation, but it does not reflect moral depravity. The ruling was unanimously signed by First Division Presiding Commissioner Socorro Inting and Commissioners Aimee Ferolino and Aimee Neri. This move signaled the dismissal of all the 7 disqualification cases against Marcos, but there were still petitioners who appealed their case before the Comelec en banc.
Comelec has begun deploying ballots that will be used in the coming May 9 elections to city and municipal treasurer's office across the Philippines. In an advisory, the poll body said the ballots were deployed from their warehouse in Pasig City to city or municipal treasurer's office nationwide. The committee in charge of shipping the ballots, headed by Commissioner Aimee Ferolino, said they hope to finish the deployment by May 5. Ferolino assured the public that security measures are in place to protect the ballots while en route to their destinations. Earlier, the poll body said they completed the printing of more than 67 million ballots for the May 9 elections last April 2.
In an exclusive interview with our team in Washington, Philippine Consul General Arribas in D.C. encouraged overseas voters not to wait until the last minute in accomplishing their ballots and to send them back sooner than later. Time is of the essence if you want your vote to count. Jeff Sanidad reports.
In another story, Nobel laureate Jose RamosHorta scored a landslide victory in East Timor's presidential election. This was according to preliminary results published by the Election Secretariat. RamosHorta defeated incumbent Francisco Luolo Gutierrez by 62.9% to 37.91%, paving the way for a second term in office after serving as president from 2007 to 2012.
We will return with the other story later on, but for now, former UK Prime Minister Teresa May strongly condemned the government's plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda. She fiercely told the Commons that she did not support the policy due to her concerns over whether it met standards on legality, practicality, and efficacy. Under the trial scheme, people who have entered the UK unlawfully will be flown to Rwanda, where they would be processed. If successful, they would have long-term accommodation in the African country. On the other hand, those who are not recognized as asylum seekers will be moved to a country where they have a right to settle in. Now, the former prime minister also asked if the scheme would lead to an increase in trafficking of women and children after reports that only single men who illegally crossed to the UK would be sent to Rwanda.
Mali's ruling junta announced the delivery of 2 more combat helicopters and surveillance radars from Russia as it tackles a bloody jihadist insurgency. The consignment brings to 8 the known number of helicopters that Moscow has provided under close ties forged by colonels who seized power in 2020. Photographs of the equipment being unloaded from a Russian cargo flight were posted on the official Twitter account of Mali's president. The posting described the gear as Mi-24P helicopters, 4th-generation radars, and other combat equipment. Russia has also supplied what are officially described as military instructors.
Cette nuit, nous recevons ce 2e lot d'équipements militaires en provenance de la Russie au nom du ministre de la Défense et des anciens combattants. Donc c'est la manifestation d'un partenariat très fructueux depuis que nous avons commencé à reprendre à travailler avec l'État russe.
A source in the Defense Ministry said 4 similar deliveries of equipment were expected over the next 3 months. Russia has been helping the impoverished Sahel nation fight a decade-old jihadist campaign that has claimed thousands of lives and driven hundreds of thousands from their homes.
U.S. President Joe Biden seems increasingly determined to keep the terrorist designation on Iran's Revolutionary Guards, which Tehran is demanding to be removed before it returns to a deal on curbing its nuclear program. Experts from the International Crisis Group, a conflict prevention think tank, told AFP that each side is just hoping for the others to blink. Negotiations opened a year ago in Vienna to revive the landmark 2015 agreement that was supposed to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Under the presidency of Donald Trump, the United States walked out of the agreement in 2018 and reinstated economic sanctions against Tehran, which in response shrugged off restrictions imposed on its nuclear activities. Biden wants Iran to return to the agreement, provided that Iran resumes those commitments. But the talks have been deadlocked since March 11, with the fate of the Guards being the final obstacle. The Islamic Republic is demanding the removal of its elite ideological force from the U.S. blacklist of foreign terrorist organizations. However, the Americans have shot back that the subject is in no way related to the nuclear issue.
Spanish police had broken up a gang suspected of making high-speed boats to transport large quantities of illegal drugs by sea. In a statement, the police said they arrested 22 people and seized 20 boats in raids carried out across Spain, including Madrid and Barcelona, as well as northern Portugal. Police suspect the gang was dedicated to the manufacture and development of high-speed boats, which were then used to ship large quantities of narcotics by sea. Pictures released show several upturned boat hulls, as well as hatches designed to hide narcotics inside the structure of the vessels. Once the boats were finished, they were shipped to various places in the Iberian Peninsula before being used to transport drugs to southern Spain. Spain is considered a key entry point for drugs bound for Europe. This is attributed to its nearness to Morocco, which is a major cannabis producer, and its close ties with its former colonies in Latin America, which is a major cocaine producing region.
14 women formally filed complaints against former Democrat Party Deputy Prin Panichpakdi in what is fast becoming the country's most high-profile Me Too case. The Me Too movement, which originated in the United States, swept the globe in 2017. But until now, Thailand had not seen a similar wave of public accusations of sexual assault against a well-known figure. The allegations against Prin have snowballed since he was accused of sexually harassing an 18-year-old student. Prin resigned from the Democrat Party soon after. Meanwhile, Democrat Party leader and Deputy Prime Minister Jurin Laksanawisit formally apologized and promised an investigation. Prin was seen as a rising political star after being appointed the Democrat Party's deputy leader in 2019, less than 3 years after joining it. Once again, in an exclusive interview with our team in Washington, Philippine Consul General Arribas in D.C. encouraged overseas voters not to wait until the last minute in accomplishing their ballots and to send them back sooner than later. Time is of the essence if you want your vote to count. Jeff Sanidad reports.
Exercise your right to nation building. That's the call of the Philippine Consul General in Washington, D.C. to overseas voters for the nearing Philippine national elections.
Well, this is their opportunity to be part of nation building. They have the constitutional right to choose the leaders of the country, so let's exercise that right.
Embassy officials did acknowledge a delay in receiving unaccomplished ballots. They say, however, there is time for Filipinos abroad to cast their vote.
Consul General Arribas asked overseas Filipinos that once they receive the ballots to waste no time, accomplish them right away and mail them back or drop them off at the embassy nearest you.
We would like to remind them that once they have received the ballot, to accomplish them and return them to us as soon as possible. We don't want our vote, the vote of our registered voters not to be counted just because it did not meet the deadline for us to receive them before they can be counted. So we just like to, as a message for everyone, to the registered voters, to make sure that there will be enough time for us to receive their ballots once they have received and accomplished them.
He also explains the process of validating the accomplished ballots once received by the embassy.
So from the time that we get the ballots from the post office, there's a drop box here at the embassy. There's a special group of election officers which would inspect the ballot envelope to make sure that that ballot corresponds to the name of a registered voter, which is included in the list of certified overseas voters, or the certified list of voters, or CLOV, which was sent to us by Comelec, to make sure that there's integrity in the ballot that we have received. And then from that group of election officials, those ballots would now be given to another group, which will be feeding them to the vote counting machine, or VCM as we call it. And that's being done every Monday and Thursday. Data will be transmitted to Comelec in due time. That is when, on the day that the voting or the elections will be closed, and that is on May 9th. So every step of the way, we make sure that the process is foolproof. Everything is above board, and everything is complying with all of the guidelines that have been set by Comelec.
And about those who missed their opportunity to register for this year's elections,
too bad. Well, there probably has been some, probably they didn't know that registration was going on, but registration has been going on for 2 years before the deadline was set. In fact, there was a 2-week extension of the deadline. So maybe they missed that information. So I suppose for us Filipinos overseas, it's always best to check the website or maybe the Facebook account of the Philippine Embassy or the Philippine Consulate General where they are residing at. Because all of the advisories, all of the information related to the elections, whether it's registration or the election itself, are all there. So we always would like to encourage people to check our website. Again, if I may say, philippineembassy-dc.org, so they will be updated all the time.
Consul General Arribas further says he hopes for peace and prosperity for the Filipino nation come Election Day and beyond.
Just peace and prosperity. It's my general hope for the country. And it's not only for this election, it's not only after the new leaders have been selected, it's for every day that I pray to God for our country. It's for peace and prosperity.
Jeff Sanidad, Mata ng Agila International, Washington, D.C. Trusted, connected, on point.
Coming right up, major companies in Shanghai opening up amid lockdown and rising COVID-19 cases. Spring storm in the U.S. leaves 300,000 in the dark. And hepatitis cases detected in children in Europe and the U.S. Find out more about these stories when Mata ng Agila International returns.
This portion is brought to you by SCCI Management and Insurance Agency Corporation and Source Alliance.
Totoo bang number 1 sa kids ang tender juicy? Patunayan po natin. Pinaka-tender ba talaga ang TJ? Talaga! Wow. Pinaka-juicy? Truly! Pinaka-masarap? The best! Wow! No more questions, Your Honor. Ubus na po eh. Walang duda! Kids can tell. Pinaka-tender, pinaka-juicy, at pinaka-masarap. Number 1 na tender juicy. May cheese dog at chicken dog pa.
Walang duda! Kids can tell, number 1 ang Pure Foods Tender Juicy.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Tapula ka! Taputi ako! Larga! Pula, sa puti, anong kaguluhan to? Masama ang sugal. At eleksyon ngayon, kaya bawal yan.
Ayon sa Omnibus Election Code, ang pag-organisa ng mga perya, sabong, boxing o kahit anong kaganapan na may sugal ay isang election offense.
Pwede yan. Nagre-relax lang naman kami. Bukod sa masama ang sugal, importante din sa alala ng ating buong atensyon. Dapat hindi tayo nadidistract ng mga panalo ko! Pakawalan niyo ako! Hindi na ako ulit! Ako si Mr. Bawal na nagpapaalala sa inyo na ang sugal, election man o hindi, huy! Bawal yan!
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
This portion is brought to you by Canrive Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation and modernization. For more information, please contact Ami Kanke.
A government-commissioned survey showed that almost all residents of Indonesia's most populous island of Java have antibodies against COVID-19, owing to a combination of prior infection and vaccination against the virus. The recent study of 2,100 people conducted in Java, home to 150 million people, and Bali, Indonesia's top tourism destination, revealed 99.2% of people had COVID-19 antibodies, which is a 6 percentage point increase from a December survey. An epidemiologist at the University of Indonesia, Pandu Riono, conducted the survey with the Health Ministry. He told reporters that the antibody levels in the latest survey were higher due to a wider booster shot rollout, as recipients had stronger protection. Indonesia's daily case numbers have decreased significantly since a spike in February driven by the Omicron variant. About 60% of its 270 million people have been vaccinated against COVID-19.
Major firms such as Tesla forged ahead to resume production after the damaging weeks-long lockdown in Shanghai. State media reported U.S. electric car giant Tesla officially resumed production after suspending work at its multi-billion-dollar gigafactory in the city for over 20 days. But this will take place in a closed-loop system, with staff sleeping on-site and being tested for COVID, according to Bloomberg News. Chinese automaker SAIC Motor said this week it was launching production resumption stress tests. Authorities have called for a white list of key industries and companies to be drawn up so production can continue, with over 600 firms identified for early work resumption in Shanghai. Supply chains have clogged and businesses have been forced to halt production in the metropolis of 25 million as authorities cling to a zero-COVID approach to combat China's worst outbreak since the virus first emerged in late 2019. Beijing's strategy of eliminating clusters as they surface through hard lockdowns and mass testing has kept fatalities low, but the measures are taking a toll on economic growth.
A Mexican judge has suspended the construction of a part of the Tren Maya due to a lack of environmental impact studies. The said tourist train project is one of the three flagship projects of President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, or AMLO. The Mayan train is envisioned as a roughly 1,500-kilometer rail loop linking popular Caribbean beaches or beach resorts and archaeological ruins. But the train project has met with opposition from environmentalists and indigenous communities. The original plan for the disputed section was for an overpass over a highway, but the route was modified to go through the jungle at ground level. The change prompted protests from environmental groups who complained that the line will now pass over underground rivers connected to a giant aquifer under the jungle. Nevertheless, AMLO dismissed the criticism of his signature project, which is supported by some residents as a potential source of jobs and economic prosperity.
Hay, con propósitos políticos, no ambientalistas, una campaña en contra del Tren Maya, financiada.
The U.S. law enforcement agency ATF, or the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, seized ghost guns in Los Angeles, California. A week earlier, President Joe Biden announced new measures cracking down on the difficult-to-trace weapons that can be assembled at home. Michael Hoffman of ATF's LA Field Division said a commercially manufactured firearm must have a serial number placed on it by its manufacturer or distributor. A ghost gun, on the other hand, does not have a serial number.
Ghost guns, and they look very... So ATF has come out with new regulations regarding ghost guns or privately manufactured firearms that are going to require that the serial number be placed on all of the frames or receivers of privately made firearms. So what type of problem that presents for law enforcement is when that firearm is recovered on the street, we are unable to tell where that firearm originated from.
The U.S. Justice Department said that from January 2016 to December 2021, the ATF received over 45,000 reports of suspected privately made firearms that were recovered by law enforcement. Those reports were linked to close to 700 homicide or attempted homicide investigations.
A spring storm caused power outages across states in the northeastern U.S., with over a foot of snow falling in some places. Some 300,000 customers lost electricity, 200,000 of them in New York State. Residents who have been looking forward to spring instead were greeted by wintry blasts as far south as Virginia. Some states issued winter storm warnings from the National Weather Service, or NWS. NWS warned that wind gusts could reach up to 40 miles per hour. The storm already caused multiple accidents and traffics in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland, while Albany, New York experienced a phenomenon called thunder snow. Coastal cities like New York City and Boston were spared but experienced heavy rains, strong wind gusts, and flooding.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken opened talks in Panama on a new diplomatic bid to check migration in Latin America. Blinken's two-day trip, his first to Latin America this year, came weeks before President Joe Biden's administration ends pandemic restrictions, allowing swift expulsions to Mexico. Blinken and U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas met with counterparts from more than 20 countries in the Western Hemisphere to discuss cooperation on migration.
This issue is a priority for the United States. We have a strong interest in protecting the security of our borders in a safe, orderly, and humane way.
Nearly 100 million people have fled their homes worldwide, a figure that Blinken noted is the highest in the world since World War II. The global crisis has been worsened by the startlingly fast displacement of millions of Ukrainians since the Russia-Ukraine conflict in February. It is said that Ukrainian refugees have received a warmer welcome in much of the West than the majority of Muslim migrants from Syria and Afghanistan.
Solomon Islands defended the controversial security pact it signed with China. Solomon Islands Prime Minister Manessa Sogavares said his government signed the security pact with China with their eyes open, but refused to say when it may be published.
Thank you.
The deal, announced by Beijing a day earlier, has faced sharp criticism from the United States and Australia, which fear the pact could lead to China gaining a military foothold in the South Pacific. Sogavares told Parliament it was an honor and privilege to announce that the deal had been signed by officials in Honiara and Beijing a few days ago. He declined to tell the opposition leader when the signed version of the pact would be made public.
The Solomon Islands People's Republic of China Security Cooperation is based on mutual respect for sovereignty and in compliance with domestic and international law. Let me assure the people of Solomon Islands
version of the China's Solomon Islands deal sent a shockwave across the region when it was leaked last month, particularly measures that would allow Chinese naval deployments to the Pacific nation, located less than 2,000 kilometers from Australia.
Health officials are now investigating unexplained cases of hepatitis in children in 4 European countries and the U.S. Cases of hepatitis or liver inflammation have been reported in Denmark, Ireland, the Netherlands, Spain, and the U.S., according to authorities. The World Health Organization said less than 5 had been found in Ireland and 3 had been found in Spain. In the U.S., 9 cases have been found in children aged 1 to 6, with 2 needing liver transplants. UK has the highest record of 74 cases. The European Centre for Disease Control said investigations into the cause of the infections are ongoing in all of the European countries where cases have been reported. Health officials added that the detection of more cases in the coming days is likely. Next up, India tapping a unique alternative energy source. Netflix rocked by subscriber loss for the first time in over a decade. And amid global crisis, what can BTS fans say about the boys group's concert and merch costs? Find out when Mata ng Agila International returns.
This portion is brought to you by Quezon City Motor Vehicle Inspection Center, Robig Builders.
Kaming mga food experts,
expert din sa pagmamahal sa pamilya namin.
And when we show our love to those closest to us,
we do it with Pure Foods corned beef.
Our gold standard in beefy taste,
texture, and quality.
That's why for us,
it will always be Pure Foods.
Dahil pag pure ang pagmamahal sa pamilya mo,
pure sarap ang ibibigay mo.
Pure sarap, Pure Foods.
Mr. Bawal, ang galing mo namang sumayaw. Pwedeng pa-copy ng dance steps mo?
Oo naman, Mr. Pwede.
Mr. Bawal, ang ganda rin ng forma mo. Pwedeng pa-copy ng forma mo?
Oo ba?
Mr. Bawal, pakopya naman sagot mo.
Yan ang hindi pwede. Ang pagsilip sa sagot ng iba, lalong-lalong na sabotuhan. Oy, bawal yan!
Ayon sa Omnibus Election Code, ang pagtatangkang silipin at alamin ang boto ng iba ay isang election offense.
Mr. Pwede? Please report to the principal's office.
Ako si Mr. Bawal, nagpapaalala sa inyo na ang pagsilip sa boto ng ibang botante. Oy, bawal yan!
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Purefoods Chinese-style luncheon meat. Ox dahil presyong pang everyday. Ox dahil ang sarap. Kaya di lang ox. Ox na ox, ang Purefoods Chinese-style luncheon meat.
The United Nations warned that 20 million people are at risk of starvation this year. Rains refusing to fall are not helping an already brutal drought in Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia. A months-long drought has left the Horn of Africa at high risk of a humanitarian catastrophe. This crisis means destroyed crops and livestock and huge numbers of people forced to leave their homes in search for food and water. The UN's World Food Program warned that the number of hungry people due to drought could spiral from the currently estimated 14 million to 20 million through the rest of this year. Making things worse, parts of the drought-hit Horn of Africa region are already reeling from the effects of ongoing conflict, poverty, and a locust invasion.
In related news, elsewhere in the world, drought is similarly threatening lives, this time in Chile. After 12 years of what has been described as uninterrupted drought, Chile's capital, Santiago, is beginning to adapt to the semi-desert climate. In 2021, the rainfall deficit was over 70%, and last year's winter was the driest of the 21st century, according to Chile's Meteorological Directorate. Grass and water-intensive plants have been replaced by less water-intensive ones, while rationing is being prepared if the rain fails to come.
India is tapping a new energy source that provides a vital revenue stream for poor Indian farmers and helps clean up smog-choked cities. The source, truckloads of cow manure. Rural households have long burnt sun-dried cattle droppings to heat stoves, a practice that continues despite government efforts to phase it out with subsidized gas cylinders. Now, villages on the outskirts of Indore are being handsomely rewarded for handing over mounds of bovine waste in a pilot project to help meet the city's power needs. Indian farmers are selling nearly a dozen truckloads of fresh manure at the equivalent of $235 per shipment, more than the monthly income of the average Indian farming household. The cattle droppings are then carted to the plant where they are mixed with household waste to produce flammable methane gas and an organic residue that can be used as fertilizer.
Conversion of municipal solid waste, conversion of agriculture residue, conversion of cow dung into bio-CNG will be very fruitful for India because it replaces the fossil fuels like diesel in our country.
India burns coal to meet nearly 3/4 of the energy needs of its 1.4 billion citizens. So its cities regularly rank among the most smog-choked urban centers in the world. Air pollution is blamed for more than 1 million deaths in India annually, according to a study published in the Lancet Medical Journal.
The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, cut its global economic outlook to 3.6%. The seismic impact of the war in Ukraine that is spreading worldwide, as well as the surging prices, shortages, and rising debt levels, slows down the growth to 0.8%. points lower than its previous estimate released in January. The fallout has been felt most acutely in the poorest nations, threatening to erase recent gains as the world had begun to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and the risks and uncertainty remain high. IMF Chief Economist Pierre-Olivier Gorincha said the economic effects of the war are spreading far and wide, like seismic waves that emanate from the epicenter of an earthquake. The conflict also sparked a flood of refugees into neighboring countries.
Global economic prospects have been severely set back, largely because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This crisis unfolds as the global economy has not yet fully recovered from the pandemic. Even before the war, inflation in many countries had been rising due to supply-demand imbalances and policy support during the pandemic, prompting a tightening of monetary policy.
The crisis will be the focus of global finance officials who gather in Washington this week, virtually and in person, for the spring meetings of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank.
Netflix shares lost a quarter of their value after the company revealed its ranks of subscribers shrank in the first quarter of this year. It was the first time in a decade that the leading streaming TV service had lost subscribers. The company ended the first quarter of this year with over 221 million subscribers, slightly less than the final quarter of last year. The Silicon Valley tech firm reported a net income of $1.6 billion in the recently ended quarter, compared to $1.7 billion in the same period a year earlier. Netflix shares were down by more than 25% in aftermarket trades that follow the release of the earnings figures. The company cited some factors hampering its growth, which include subscribers sharing their accounts with people not living in their homes. Another factor crimping Netflix growth is intense competition from titans such as Apple, Amazon, and Disney+.
Now, the Red Gibson, the guitar that was smashed in Paris in 2009, triggered the breakup of Oasis stars Liam and Noel Gallagher. Now it goes under the auction in Paris next month alongside other rock memorabilia. The guitar already has a starting price of 150,000 euros or over 8 million pesos. But the auctioneer said bids for it could even reach 500,000 euros or a whopping 28 million pesos in the sale on May 17. The Britpop legends had been slated to play toward the end of a year-long global tour, but things went unwell between the two brothers backstage, and one of Noel's guitars got broken, and that led to the group's breaking up. Now, an eager crowd waiting for the pair to appear was stunned to get the message that Oasis was history. The dramatic split set off years of public barbs between the two brothers via the press and social media that have gradually cooled off. Also on the auction block, but expected to fetch much lower bids, is a set of bondage gear worn by Depeche Mode's Martin Gore in a 1980s photo shoot, and a rare vinyl signed by both Jimi Hendrix and French rocker Johnny Hallyday.
With a tribute exhibition and a concert in Medellin, Colombia, celebrated the 90th birthday of world-renowned artist Fernando Botero on April 19. Curators, critics, and politicians met at the Museo de Antigua to inaugurate the exhibition, which brings together unpublished paintings and photographs by one of the most important living artists in the world of contemporary art. Botero's signature style, known as Boterismo, features huge exaggerated figures and characters. Selling for millions of dollars, his art can be found in famous locations around the world, such as New York's Park Avenue and Paris's Champs-Élysées. Since the 90s, the artist has donated some of his creations to Medellin. His gifts have been a symbol of recovery for the inhabitants of Colombia's second largest city, hit at one time by drug trafficking terrorism.
New Zealand's clash with Costa Rica for a spot at the Qatar World Cup will take place on June 14. New Zealand football confirmed on Twitter that date for the Intercontinental Playoff. The winner of the crunch match will take their place in a formidable World Cup Group E in Qatar alongside former champions Germany, Spain, and Japan. The Kiwis are bidding to reach the World Cup finals for the third time, having played in the global showpiece in 1982 and 2010. The Qatar World Cup officially begins on November 21st.
Amid the rising cost of almost everything everywhere, fans of K-pop group BTS are convinced that spending on concert tickets and the boy band's merchandise items is worth every penny. Many of them say it's all about loving yourself. In Las Vegas, Anna Cui speaks with some of them.
BTS closed out their 4 sold-out shows here in Las Vegas this weekend. But as you can see behind me, there are some Army members who are sticking around to do some last-minute shopping. BTS Army can't seem to get enough of buying up merchandise as they had opportunities to snatch them up before and after the concerts, and even now here at this K-pop store before they head back home. A store employee said they had been packed ever since BTS came to Las Vegas, but says these fans have been patient and even gladly complied with the mask requirement to enter the store. Some of the Army members have come a long way to see BTS, and even though the group's 4-day residency at the Allegiant Stadium ended, the spending of these devoted fans continues.
I think the flight was 700 euros and a bit, then the hotel 400, and the concert I think
also like
600 for both days, so a lot of money.
And then here you go. I see here we go again. K-pop stores, so another, right, couple hundred probably for
No, 6.
Oh!
I almost have all albums, so just a couple left.
We talked to some Army members who shared with us their experience, and we asked just what it is about BTS that makes it all worth it.
Well, it's kind of expensive, but it's really worth it, honestly.
Why do you love them so much?
Well, they have helped me a lot with my anxiety, depression, loving myself. So it's really, really nice meeting them for the first time.
I just love their music and their personalities. They are so down to earth, even though they are really big. They're really funny, really kind. Yeah, I love everything about them.
The music is so amazing, and realmente me ayuda.
Matandang Agila International, Las Vegas, Nevada. Trusted, connected, on point.
I love them. I love watching their concerts. I know,
love
it makes
the
you feel
energy.
young, right?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, before we conclude tonight's broadcast, let us ponder on a quote from a biochemistry professor and science fiction author Isaac Asimov. He said, "It is important to remember that the viciousness and wrongs of life stick out very plainly, but that even at the worst times there is a great deal of goodness, kindness, and day-to-day decency that goes unnoticed and makes no headlines." You know how you make 100 good things and no one knows about it? You make one mistake and they will remember forever.
We'll remember that. And that is a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates in our social media channels. I am CJ Hirro.
And I'm Nina Ricci, Alagao Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
This program is supported by SMC Global Power.